Welcome to part 3 of the Book of Mormon Geography series. I'm Eric Turner, and in part 3 we'll be taking a look at geography features point by point. Part 1, I reviewed the 6 proofs that any geography model must meet, defined the probability of describing these proofs accurately, identified a location in Mesoamerica that meets all of the proofs, and the extreme probability of those proofs establishes that location as a fact. Part 2, I assess the main assertions of the Heartland model. What did Joseph Smith know about the geography? Promised lands, what does the Book of Mormon really say about those? Hilkamora, is there one or two? Zarahemla, is it a Book of Mormon location or just a namesake from the Book of Mormon? And in part 3, we'll be doing a point-by-point comparison of Mesoamerica and Heartland models for specific geography. Included in these are investigations into cold, the sea west, distances, passes, cities, riding, wars, destructions, and other geography. All right, looking at the River Sidon, from part 1 in the series, investigated the verses for the River Sidon, and the River Sidon flows from south to the north. It is a northward flowing river. The Heartland model has the River Sidon as the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River flows north to south, which is exactly opposite the direction that the River Sidon flows in the Book of Mormon. So the Heartland model does not match the Book of Mormon with regards to the River Sidon. In Mesoamerica, the Usumacinta River, it does flow south to north, and it does match the Book of Mormon descriptions. Okay, let's talk about cold. And when I mean by cold, regarding the cold temperatures in the Book of Mormon, there is a description in Alma of Alma and Amulek being held in a prison in the city Ammonihah. Now, note here, Ammonihah is south of the Narrow Neck. Starting in Alma 1071 or 1422 in the LDS, says, and they did withhold food from them, that they might hunger, and water, that they might thirst. And they also did take from them their clothes, that they were naked, and thus were they bound with strong cords, and confined in prison. And it came to pass, after they had thus suffered for many days, and it was on the 12th day in the 10th month, in the 10th year of the reign of judges over the people of Nephi, that the chief judge over the land of Ammonihah and many of their teachers and their lawyers went in unto the prison where Alma and Amulek were bound with cords. Back in Alma 9, this would be 10:6 in the LDS, it said, even until the 4th day of the 7th month, which is in the 10th reign of the reign of judges. This is the beginning of their captivity, and this occurs, the 7th month occurs typically between mid-September and mid-October. All right, and going back to Alma 1073, and it came to pass after they had thus suffered many days, and it was on the 12th day in the 10th month. Now, the 10th Hebrew month is the same time as January. Now, lack of food and clothing, as mentioned in Alma 1071, reduces the ability of the human body to generate body heat. Being bound by cords also prevents movement, also reducing the ability to generate body heat. Now, there are numerous cases where people in light clothing have died of hypothermia and sustained, and when I say sustained, less than 12 hours temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. And no cases of death were found when above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's highly unlikely that a naked person suffering from hunger can survive if the temperatures fall below 50 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 12 hours, which would be like overnight. A naked, hungry, and thirsty person will die of hypothermia if the temperature falls below 40 degrees for 12 hours. And if the temperature is less than 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, death occurs typically in less than an hour due to hypothermia. So let's see where in the world survivable January temperatures occur. Here is a map of North and the upper part of South America for average January temperatures. We have on the temperature gauge over here 50 degrees and 10 degrees Celsius. That was discussed that below that, typically people die of hypothermia in 12 hours or less. And what we have is in the Heartland model, Ammonihah is located somewhere in this area. In the Mesoamerica model, Ammonihah is located in this area in Guatemala, South Mexico area. Now for the Heartland location, the average January temperature is 23 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 5 degrees Celsius as the average low temperature. In Mesoamerica, in the location where Ammonihah would be, the average low temperature is 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So at 23 degrees Fahrenheit, a person wouldn't live overnight, being naked and tied with cords. They would die of hypothermia. So the Heartland model location is not survivable. It does not agree with the Book of Mormon. Survivable naked January temperatures only occur in Florida, Mesoamerica, and further south into South America. This is one of the facts, if you will, that indicate that eastern United States is not the location for the Book of Mormon. You can't get away from the temperatures that happen in January. All right, let's discuss the sea north and the sea south. So the sea north and the sea south are mentioned in only one verse in the Book of Mormon. It's in Helam 2:8 in RLDS. It's 3:8 in the LDS. And it came to pass that they did multiply and spread, and did go forth from the land southward to the land northward, and did spread insomuch as they began to cover the face of the whole earth, from the sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east. Now it seems a bit strange, considering how often the sea east and the sea west are mentioned. Sea east is mentioned in 36 verses in the Book of Mormon, and the sea west is mentioned in 40 verses. That it's only this one verse that describes or identifies a sea south and a sea north. And normally scientific principles cannot be used on a single reference. More than one reference typically is needed to confirm a pattern to make any kind of a conclusion. So what can we discern from the information in Helam 2:8 or 3:8 in the LDS? Well, first, the verse mentions all four cardinal compass points. The only Book of Mormon verses that include all four cardinal compass points, meaning north, south, east, and west, are 2 Nephi 12:65, or 29:11 in the LDS, Mosiah 11:157, or 27:6 in the LDS, Helaman 133, or 131 in the LDS, Helaman 2:8, or 3:8 in the LDS, as we've been talking about. 3 Nephi 1:19, that's 1:17 in the LDS, and 3 Nephi 9:49, which is 20:13 in the LDS. With the exception of Helaman 133, which talks about the Lamanites being surrounded on all four sides by armies, all the verses talk about the whole earth and use the four directions as a metaphor to indicate everywhere. The question is, does the pattern of everywhere actually exist? All right, so if the seas in Helaman 2:8 are indeed used as a metaphor, are there other references that support the metaphor? All right, so in 2 Nephi, there are some verses that can be used to substantiate the metaphor. In 2 Nephi 7:11, which is 10:6 in the LDS, and they who shall not be destroyed shall be scattered among all nations. And it shall come to pass that they shall be gathered in from their long dispersion from the isles of the sea, and from the four parts of the earth. For the Lord has made the sea our path, and we are upon an isle of the sea. But great are the promises of the Lord unto those who are upon the isles of the sea. Wherefore, as it says isles, there must needs be more than this, and they are inhabited also by our brethren. Isles are mentioned here and in other verses as metaphors for the extremities of the earth, meaning four parts, four corners, four quarters. All of these are metaphors for the extremities of the earth. So as mentioned in 2 Nephi 7:35, or 10:20 in the LDS, the seas surround the isles. Well, okay, over 2,000 years ago, the known world, and the known world being around Mesopotamia, was considered to be surrounded by seas. A sea east, a sea north, a sea west, and a sea south. Which kind of begs the question, were they using a metaphor or referring to real seas? So here is the world's oldest world map. It was found in Babylonia, and it's dated no earlier than the 9th century BCE. Now, this tablet does mention that this is a copy from an even older copy, but this is the only copy, or the oldest copy, that anyone has ever found. On it, there is a circular world. That's this inner disk, surrounded by oceans, which on the tablet's called the Bitter River, and that would go all the way around the outside. So the world is surrounded by the ocean. And there are 7 regions at the extremities of the world. On the text here, they're referred to as Negu, meaning regions, but also considered as faraway islands of the sea. Here is a representation of a map that was made by Anaximander, who lived between 610 and 546 BCE. So this is the time frame of the world viewpoint at the time of the Book of Mormon, and this is when Lehi left Jerusalem. It also depicts a circular world surrounded by oceans, a west, north, east, and south ocean. And it was considered that the seas come in from the edges of the world. So the ocean surrounds the world, and something like the Mediterranean was considered to be, call it a lagoon or an extension of the West Sea, since it came in from the West Sea at the edge of the world. An important note is that inland water bodies, for here the Black Sea for an example, were not considered to be the circular ocean. They were identified as an inland sea. Even as late as 276 to 194 BCE, this is a map that was drawn by Eratosthenes. This has the text on that translated into English, but again, you see that the world was surrounded by oceans still. Up at the top, we have the Northern Ocean. Down at the bottom, we have the Atlantic Ocean, and you can see the Atlantic Ocean was considered going all the way into what we currently call the Indian Ocean. It also has the Erythraean Sea, which is also identified as a South Sea in Babylonian texts. Erythraean means red in Greek, and the Red Sea originally means South Sea. Babylonians, red equaled the south, so the area here was considered the South Sea. So we have the North Ocean or North Sea, and we have the South Sea. Now, it's interesting to note that what we call in the current day the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, at one time were both called the Red Sea, the exact same sea. So it didn't matter whether this water body, the water body outside in the Indian Ocean, as well as the Persian Gulf, was all considered the Red Sea, which was the South Sea. The Persian Gulf, just as a note, has probably had people identify anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 names over the course of history. So it's had a lot of names, but there was a period when, as I mentioned, both what we call the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf were both called the Red Sea. And it was also the Red Sea out in the Indian Ocean, because it was all considered the South Sea, and these were just water bodies that came in from the South Sea. So using the premise that the Bible can be referenced to help interpret grammar, the 4 compass points in the same verse are used to describe, in the Bible, the extremities of the earth in 4 verses, the sides of a defined area or building in 8 verses, and as a metaphor and a prophecy in 1 verse. Interesting to note, never are they used to describe actual geographical places. They are always metaphors, or with the sides of a defined building, something that was concrete and very localized. Also, all verses in the Bible and Book of Mormon that use the phrase face of the whole earth use it as a metaphor to describe the extremities of the earth. And we see that according to the maps of the time. Even more compelling, in the Book of Mormon, the text after face of the whole earth further explains the concept of what the face of the whole earth means in all 8 verses where that phrase occurs. And in Helam 2:8, it says the 4 cardinal points C's describe how the people spread over the land. It says the face of the whole earth, from the sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east. So the 4 C's explains what face of the whole earth actually means, which, as we've seen from the maps, is the entirety of the world. So the conclusion is that Helam 2:8 or 3:8 in the LDS is a metaphor for the entire earth. It is not a localized description. The sea north and the sea south are metaphors and are not real geography. The sea west and sea east are also metaphors in this verse, but the names sea west and sea east are defined and justified as physical seas and oceans in other verses of the Book of Mormon. So this verse cannot be substantiated as physical geography using grammatical analysis. It describes the whole world view that people had at the time of the world, which was surrounded by oceans. So if someone states that the sea north and sea south really exist, then you would have to ask them how they determined that they were actual seas and not metaphors. And as an example, in 1 Nephi 6:8 or 21 in the LDS, it talks about or refers to the waters of Judah. Now, this parallels Isaiah 48:1, and this is truly a metaphor. So, unless you have a way to identify metaphors different from actual geography, you would have to say that the waters of Judah was some sort of actual geography, but we know from Isaiah 48:1 it is not. It is a metaphor. So you can't go just by what the words look like in the Book of Mormon. You have to use the context and the grammatical usage to help identify whether it is truly a physical geography or a metaphor. Now, the Heartland model does not discuss at all Hebrew metaphors. It assumes everything is physical geography, and I would have to ask whether or not they would consider the waters of Judah as physical geography. We know from Isaiah 48:1 it is not. So let's take a look at the West Sea. In Alma 1368, and this is 2225 in the LDS, and it came to pass that the king sent a proclamation throughout all the land amongst all his people who were in all his land, who were in all the regions round about. So this is talking about a larger area of the Lamanites around the land of Nephi, which was bordering even to the sea on the east and on the west. So this region that's being described extends to both seas, from the sea east to the sea west, which was divided from the land of Zarahemla by a narrow strip of wilderness. And this is the Lamanites' description of the Lamanites controlling the land south of the narrow wilderness from the sea east to the sea west. Going on, so this region being discussed, which ran from the sea east even to the sea west. So this phrase confirms the use of the phrase in 1368 where it says to the sea on the east and on the west, that it is meaning from the sea east even to the sea west. And round about on the borders of the seashore and the borders of the wilderness, which was on the north by the land of Zarahemla, through the borders of Manti by the head, and we know that the head is a source and not a confluence of rivers. So by the head of the river Sidon, so these regions being described, running from the east towards the west, and thus were the Lamanites and the Nephites divided. Now the more idle part of the Lamanites lived in the wilderness and dwelt in tents, and they were spread through the wilderness on the west in the land of Nephi. So here we're talking about the west part of the land of Nephi, or just to the west of the land of Nephi. Yea, and also on the west of the land Zarahemla, in the borders by the seashore. And again, on the west and in the land of Nephi, so it's reiterating what was in 1370, which is 2227 in the LDS, in the place of their father's first inheritance, and thus bordering along by the seashore. So even within the same verse, it is referencing and emphasizing that the west of the land of Zarahemla, there is a seashore. Right. Another reference to the sea west is commonly misinterpreted due to not knowing and applying the Hebrew basis for the translation. In Alma 2461, this is 53:8 in the LDS. And now it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites on the west sea south, while in the absence of Moroni. Now, this phrase has puzzled many people, but when you look at the Hebrew, it becomes very clear. In Hebrew, adjectives, in this case west, always comes after the noun. So sea is the noun, west is the adjective. So in Hebrew, it would be sea west. In Hebrew, prefixes, so the words on thee, apply to a main word, and they're never used for an adjective. So they're not associated with west in this verse. In Hebrew grammar, the sentence then becomes, now the Hebrew words are in bold, and the brackets include the Hebrew word and the prefixes and suffixes for those Hebrew words. And now is one word in Hebrew. It came to pass, is another word in Hebrew, that the armies of the Lamanites, sea, west, on the south, while in the absence of Moroni. Now, if we put that together in the entire verse, it says, now it came to pass that the armies of Lamanites, and this is where, if you substitute on the West Sea south, a note here is that a comma after sea is incorrect Hebrew punctuation. What that comma does is it actually tries to split the prefix from the main word in Hebrew, and that's not a place where a comma could go. So, now it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites, sea west on the south, while in the absence of Moroni, on account of some intrigue amongst the Nephites, which caused dissensions amongst them, had gained some ground over the Nephites, yea, inasmuch as they obtained possession of a number of their cities. Here, this would be in part that of the land. On the south indicates a direction from a reference. And the reference in this case is referring to the armies in that part of the land. So it speaks to a land, not a sea, on the south of the Nephite lands near the sea west. Had gained some ground means that the action is on land and not on a sea, and on the south refers to the ground region to the south. It does not mean that there was a West Sea that is south of another West Sea. Now you can see the use of the phrase on the direction in this verse. There are a number of other verses where you see the same phrasing. In Alma 20:38, which is 43:35 in the LDS, and as the Lamanites had passed the hill Riplah and come into the valley and began to cross the river Sidon, the army which was concealed on the south of the hill, so the hill is the reference, on the south, so on the south of the hill, which was led by a man whose name was Lehi, and he led his army forth and encircled the Lamanites about on the east in their rear. The description in this part of the Book of Mormon has the army of the Lamanites traveling on the north side of Hill Riplah, and they were coming from the east valley of the river Sidon, so we know that they were traveling from east to west. And the army of Lehi, which was on the south of Riplah, came around behind them, which would then be on the east of the Lamanites. So on the east, the reference there are the Lamanites and this is the description that we have. Now, the Heartland model depicts the lower Mississippi Valley as a body of water, and they call it the Sea West South. And on any of the maps of the Heartland model, you will see that this lower part of the Mississippi looks pretty much like I have it shaded here, depicting it as an inundated body of water. Well, archaeology has found many sites named for the Tefunkta culture, which existed between 800 BC and 200 BC, and Marksville culture, which existed from 50 BC to 400 AD. So that the two cultures span the time of the Nephites. In the lower Mississippi Valley, indicating the Mississippi River existed, and some of the sites are by the river that has not changed its course since that time. So all of these red dots are the different archaeological sites. And as far as I know, people in that time frame didn't know how to live underwater, so this must have been dry land. Archaeology has identified that some of these sites were by the Mississippi, and some of these places the Mississippi has not changed its course in 3,000 years. So what we have is there was no sea here during Book of Mormon times. Now, the Heartland model does provide a description for what it means by the West Sea South. Source is given here. And the title says, Sea is a River. It says, I love how Jonathan Neville explains the river Sidon as a possible sea. I looked up the word sea in biblical Hebrew concordances. Strong's Concordance transliterates the Hebrew as Yam with the number 3220. The NAS Exhaustive Concordance defines Yam as sea and notes variations including sea coast, west, west side, westward. Brown Driver Briggs' definition offers usages in context, including the Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, Dead Sea, Sea of Galilee, and a mighty river. The example given for a mighty river is the Nile River. The Hebrew term Yam is used in Isaiah 19:5 and Nahum 3:8, actually twice in Nahum 3:8, both in connection with Thebes or the modern Luxor, which is on the Nile River. There's another explanation. The source is given here from the Heartland model site. It says the American setting has Lehigh Landing in the Florida Panhandle, the land of Nephi in the mountains of Tennessee, Bountiful in Indiana and Ohio, Zarahemla in Iowa, the Sidon River comprising the river system that includes the Missouri and the Ohio rivers, plus the upper Mississippi, with the West Sea South being the lower Mississippi, the West Sea North being Lake Michigan. Now, I have to make a note here that the term West Sea North is not discussed anywhere in the Book of Mormon. So let's take a look at Strong's word for Yam. It is H3220. Definition is from an unused root meaning to roar, a sea as breaking in noisy surf or large body of water. The key part of the definition is the word Yam means to roar, not that it means anything or any kind of water. Large bodies of water, be it oceans or large seas, have waves driven by winds that crash on the seashore, which makes a roaring sound, which is why they are described as Yam. The places where rivers roar are cataracts and rapids. So the Nile River is referred to as Yam in Isaiah 19:5 and Nahum 3:8. The Nile has 6 cataracts along its length, and these are the places for the roaring. The Euphrates River is also referred to as Yam in Isaiah 27:1 and Jeremiah 51:36. Now, the upper Euphrates in Syria, which is closest to Israel, has rapids, and the river at the town of Hit, Iraq, also has rapids. And these are the places for roaring on the Euphrates. Now, the lower Mississippi has no cataracts or rapids. It would not be described as yam, or a roaring. Again, yam refers to a noise, not the water. So here we have a map. I've taken this from Heartland Maps and put it on a map where I can put a lot of labels. And what we have is we have the Sea West South, but the lower Mississippi is not a yam. So, and we've also described that the river has always been there. It is not depicted as a body of water as you see on Heartland model maps. Also, on the west of land Zarahemla, there is no sea. Land of Zarahemla goes from like the western border of Indiana all the way up here somewhere in Nebraska and upper part of Iowa. So over here on the west, there is no sea. I go further west, there is no sea. Matter of fact, the Sea West, north, is actually on the east of the land of Zarahemla, which is not what the Book of Mormon says. And there is no separate Sea West South from the Sea West. Like I mentioned in looking at the Hebrew grammar of that one verse, it is still just the one Sea West. The South is a mention to the land and not to the sea. So this does not agree with the Book of Mormon to have two bodies of water identified. One is the Sea West North and one is the Sea West South. And the reason that the Sea West North as a description is not used is because the South reference to the Sea West in the verse that we discussed was talking about the land next to the Sea West, the land being on the south, not the Sea West being on the south. And as we discussed with the maps, inland seas, according to Hebrew cosmology, are not considered to be part of the seas or oceans that surround the entire world. So just like the Black Sea was not considered part of the seas around the world, the seas here would also not be considered as the seas that surround the world. And we don't even see Lake Superior, so that's a fifth sea. And so Lake Superior is ignored by the Heartland model. So the locations as described here are not matching the Book of Mormon descriptions. Now, if we take a look at Mesoamerica, we have Zarahemla, and the land of Zarahemla would be here. City of Nephi would be here. And we have the Sea West. So to the sea and on the west, we have the West Sea from Zarahemla. And we have the description of the Lamanites that were on the west of the land of Nephi. That would be along here. It's kind of a valley. There's water. It's not mountainous. It's kind of the valley. So that's where you would find people living. We also have the description on the west of the land Zarahemla in the borders by the seashore. So on the west by the borders on the seashore would be here. The South Wilderness is kind of this hilly area along here. The head of the river Sidon is described somewhere in this area. And so the region around the land of Nephi that we discussed earlier goes from the east, so to the east, or to the sea on the east, and to the sea on the west, and roundabout to the wilderness on the north by Zarahemla. And this is the wilderness or the hilly area by the land of Zarahemla. So the Mesoamerica model, there is just one sea west, as described in the Book of Mormon, and the description matches what we were looking at in Alma 1370 or 2227 in the LDS. So let's now focus on the South Wilderness. So there are some key verses that define the South Wilderness. In Alma 11:9, this would be 16:6 in the LDS. And Alma returned and said unto them, Behold, the Lamanites will cross the river Sidon in the South Wilderness, away up beyond the borders of the land Manti. Now, from this we know that the South Wilderness is up in altitude and south of the land of Manti. Also, that part of the river Sidon is in the South Wilderness. And it came to pass that Zoram and his sons crossed over the river Sidon with their armies and marched away beyond the borders of Manti into the South Wilderness, which was on the east side of the river Sidon. Here we have a reference on the east, and the reference here is the river Sidon, so this is a location to the east. So from this we know that people can march into and through the wilderness. And the river Sidon flows through the South Wilderness. So from this we can tell that the wilderness is not a river. In Alma 1368, this is 2227 in the LDS, and it came to pass that the king sent a proclamation throughout all the land, amongst all his people who were in all the land, who were in all the regions round about, which was bordering even to the sea on the east and on the west, and which was divided from the land of Zarahemla by a narrow strip of wilderness. This is the only verse that mentions a narrow strip of wilderness, and it describes it as the wilderness between the lands of Nephi and Zarahemla, which ran from the sea east even to the sea west and roundabout on the borders of the seashore, and the borders of the wilderness, which was on the north by the land of Zarahemla, through the borders of Manti, by the head of the river Sidon, running from the east towards the west, and thus were the Lamanites and the Nephites divided. So we have a description of the narrow strip of wilderness. The next verse has that the head of the river Sidon is in this wilderness. So the head of the river Sidon is in the narrow strip of wilderness near the land of Manti. In Alma 26:134, this is 58:13 in the LDS. And thus we did go forth with all our might against the Lamanites who were in the city of Manti, and we did pitch our tents by the wilderness side, which was near to the city. So the commentary on this verse references the places of Manti, the South Wilderness, and the wilderness around Manti. There is a wilderness next to the city of Manti that we get from this verse. The phrase by the wilderness side indicates that the wilderness around Manti is just on one side of the city of Manti, and not on the surrounding the city, but just on one side. Since the South Wilderness is the same as the wilderness around Manti, and the South Wilderness is southward of the land of Manti, then the wilderness side would be the southward side of the city. And in Alma 15:14, this is 27:14 in the LDS, and they gathered together all their people, and these were all who were in the land of Nephi, yea, all the people of the Lord, and did gather together all their flocks and herds, and departed out of the land, and came into the wilderness which divided the land of Nephi from the land Zarahemla, and came over near the borders of the land. So there is just one wilderness between the lands of Nephi and Zarahemla that we get from this verse. So the south wilderness is also what was called the narrow strip of wilderness. We saw from Alma 11:11 or 16:7 in the LDS that people marched beyond Manti into and up into the south wilderness, which also had the river Sidon. The head of the river Sidon is in the narrow strip of wilderness. We got that from Alma 1369 or 22:27 in the LDS. And a note here that south wilderness and narrow wilderness are descriptions and not proper nouns. So I know some people tend to view the south wilderness as a proper noun, like you stamp it on a map and say, here is the south wilderness. And that's not what the Book of Mormon says. The south wilderness and narrow wilderness are descriptions. And in the Hebrew, the adjective would be afterwards, so it would be wilderness south or wilderness narrow. So one wilderness divided the land of Nephi and Zarahemla. We get that from Alma 15:14 or 27:14. So from all of this, we know that the south wilderness and the narrow wilderness are speaking of the same wilderness. So what do we mean by wilderness? Well, in Hebrew, it's midbar, which is Strong's H4057, defined as a pasture, uninhabited land, wilderness, large tracts of wilderness around cities, or mouth. I'll comment on that below. Well, Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon provides probably a better description of the definition. It is an uninhabited plain country fit for feeding flocks, not desert, but it is a pasture. A sterile, sandy country, so we know that there is little water in the wilderness. Now, the root of midbar is dbr, or dabar, which in Hebrew is to speak. And this has to go, this is associated with the shepherds as they are talking to their flock of sheep, as they are taking them to feed. And when they take them out to feed, they are taking them into an area that is not cultivated. And in Israel, in many cases, this was the dry frontier where crops were not grown, but grass and vegetation grows there naturally. So that's what the sheep were feeding on. And so the shepherds, as they talk to their sheep, guide their sheep, that became associated with the place where the sheep were grazing, and that became the association with the wilderness. Now, water can be found in a wilderness. In Genesis 16:7, it says, by a fountain of water in the wilderness. And one can wander in the wilderness. Genesis 21:14 says, she departed and wandered in the wilderness. And if we take a look at Webster's 1828 dictionary defining wilderness, it also defines wilderness, entry number 1, a desert, a tract of land or region, uncultivated and uninhabited. Uninhabited meaning that it was too dry for habitation, but it was wet enough to grow the grass and other vegetation that the sheep would graze on. So whether a forest or a wide barren plain, in the United States it is applied only to a forest. In Scripture it is applied frequently to the deserts of Arabia. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness 40 years. Entry number 2, it refers to the ocean as a wilderness, and the example usage here is given the watery wilderness yields no supply. Now, the reference to the ocean as a wilderness originated in the 1700s, so it's a relatively recent definition and was not a definition that was used in the time of the Book of Mormon. So a Hebrew wilderness is land and not a river. So looking at where the South Wilderness is in Mesoamerica, we're here at the base of the Yucatan Peninsula. We have the River Sidon, and we have a branch, west branch and a east branch. We have Manti, we have Zarahemla, and the city of Nephi. And the South Wilderness would be between Nephi and Manti, as we know that Manti had a wilderness side, and we know that the South Wilderness was between Nephi and Zarahemla. Now, for the Heartland model, in the source as given here, it says, I propose that the narrow strip of wilderness is a major river or system of rivers that serves as an effective border. Narrow suggests a vale, valley, or riverbed. Strip suggests something that is long and thin, like a river. In this other reference given here, it says Jonathan Neville said, from the perspective of people who used water as boundaries and highways for travel, it would be significant that these lands, the lands of the Nephites and the Lamanites, both of them, were merely surrounded by water. The border between them had to be water. In fact, this requirement reinforces the conclusion that the narrow strip of wilderness was a water border. So let's take a look at that. Here in the inset is a map from the Heartland model with the source given here. We have Nephi, which is down here in southern Tennessee by the Georgia border. Heartland model actually has two locations for the city of Manti, and I've put both of them here, and the city of Zarahemla in Iowa. Down through here is the Mississippi River, which the Heartland model names as the River Sidon. But from part one, we know that this is not the River Sidon because the River Sidon is a northward flowing river. But we will continue on the analysis here for the Heartland. This river system here is the Missouri River. And then we have a short section of the Mississippi River. And then we have the Ohio River and Allegheny River going up here. And so this red line is what is identified in the Heartland model as the narrow wilderness, which is the Ohio, Mississippi, and Missouri rivers. The quote from that source, it says, the red line is the Ohio Allegheny rivers, which was the narrow strip of wilderness that separated the Nephites and the Lamanites. So to summarize things, the south or narrow wilderness is up in altitude. That's what the Book of Mormon says. The Heartland model, by defining the wilderness as a river, is always going to be down in altitude from the surrounding terrain. Mesoamerica, as we saw, the terrain between Manti and Nephi is hilly terrain. Now, the south or narrow wilderness is land. That's the Hebrew definition. So the Heartland model ignores the Hebrew definition. It also ignores the Webster's 1828 definition and makes its own definition, that the wilderness is a system of rivers, meaning that it is water. Mesoamerica, the terrain between Manti and Nephi is hilly terrain. And we also know that the south or narrow wilderness has the river Sidon flowing through it. The Heartland model, the wilderness is a river, and rivers don't flow through rivers. It's just a river. Mesoamerica, the terrain between Manti and Nephi is hilly terrain with a flowing river on the east, as described in the Book of Mormon, and also a branch on the west, as described in the Book of Mormon. So the Mesoamerica location does fit all of the required criteria for the South Wilderness, and the Heartland model doesn't match the Book of Mormon in any regard with regards to the South Wilderness. All right, so this is interesting. Looking at the distances. So there's a few places in the Book of Mormon where distances are described. One is in Mosiah 11:1. One is 23:1 in the LDS. It says, "Now Alma, having been warned of the Lord that the armies of King Noah would come upon them, and had made it known to his people, therefore they gathered together their flocks, and took of their grain, and departed," they departed from Mormon, "into the wilderness before the armies of King Noah. And the Lord did strengthen them, that the people of King Noah could not overtake them and to destroy them. And they fled 8 days' journey into the wilderness. And they came to a land, yea, even a very beautiful and pleasant land, a land of pure water. And it came to pass that they began to prosper exceedingly in the land, and they called the land Helam." And further on in Mosiah 11:69, 24-20, it says, "And Alma and his people departed Helam into the wilderness. And when they had traveled all day, they pitched their tents in a valley, and they called the valley Alma, because he led their way in the wilderness. And now the Lord said unto Alma, Haste thee, and get thou and this people out of this land, for the Lamanites have awakened and do pursue thee. Therefore get thee out of the land, and I will stop the Lamanites in this valley, that they come no further in pursuit of this people." And it came to pass that they departed out of the valley, and took their journey unto the wilderness. And after they had been in the wilderness 12 days, they arrived to the land of Zarahemla, and King Mosiah did also receive them with joy. Now, traveling with flocks, as mentioned in the verses here, you're limited to a maximum of 14 miles per day. And it doesn't matter whether the flock we're talking about is cattle, goats, sheep, fowl like turkeys or whatever. 14 miles is going to be the limit that they can travel in a day. This is because more than 14 miles, the animals get stressed. They will either die or they will not be able to travel the next day if you try and push them too hard. Now, the only domesticated animals that can travel more than 14 miles per day are standard horses, which can travel 20 to 30 miles a day. Field sporting dogs can travel up to 20 miles per day, and racing huskies can travel over 100 miles a day, but they have to be trained and exercised to be able to get up to that. So it's not something that you can take a husky and connect them to a sled and expect them to go 100 miles a day. They would just be like any other field or sporting dog that could travel up to 20 miles. You really have to treat them like athletes to get them up to 100 miles per day. So with this limitation of 14 miles per day, 8 days means that they can travel 112 miles. And this would be from Mormon to Helam. In 12 days, they could travel 168 miles, and this would be the distance from Valley Alma to Zarahemla. And the total of 13 days, the 1 day plus the 12 days, is 182 miles, and this would be from Helam to Zarahemla. All right, so this is a map from the Heartland model. The source is given here in the corner. We have the Waters of Mormon here. This is Chattanooga, Tennessee, where the city of Nephi is. So they have the Waters of Mormon here. And the city of Helam, they have at Pinson Mounds in western Tennessee. And the distance between those two is 266 miles, which at 14 miles a day is 19 days, not 8 days, as described in the Book of Mormon. All right. This is the one creek at Pinson Mounds. Um, there's currently a road that crosses it, and this is where the picture is taken from, and you can see the river is as dirty as mud. Not only that, but 1,500 feet south, which is just off the image here, the stream enters into a boggy area and goes into a wetland. So the water is not clear. All right, this is another map from the Heartland model. Reference is given down here. We have Zarahemla up here at Montrose, Iowa. We have Helam at Pinson Mounds, Tennessee. And the distance is 445 miles between the two, which at 14 miles a day is 31 days and not 13 days. So the Heartland model does not agree with the Book of Mormon distances. So let's take a look at the Mesoamerican model. Again, we're looking at kind of the base of the Yucatan Peninsula. We have Zarahemla up here. Sidon Nephi would be around here somewhere, and Mormon would be over here. From Mormon, if you cross over into this valley and you go up this valley, 115 miles is 8 days at 14 miles per day. It's actually like 14.3 miles per day. And that gets you to this particular valley. And we see that there is a wilderness right here. And we know that they went into the wilderness one day and went into the Valley Alma. And so they crossed over that wilderness into this valley here, and that would be the Valley Alma. And from the Valley Alma to Zarahemla is 164 miles, which is 12 days at 14 miles per day. And as a note, from Nephi to Zarahemla, 14 miles a day would be about 11 days. It's 152 miles. So the Mesoamerican model does agree with the Book of Mormon distances. And this is one of the streams around the Helam area. This would be in Morazan, Guatemala. This is the Rio Tocoy Zima. And you can see that this is very clear, very pure. The streams in this particular area, there are streams like this in the different valleys right around the location that I had identified. And it is a very pure, clear stream. This is a 3D model of the terrain right around Helam, and we're talking about this particular area at the base of the Yucatan Peninsula. Helam would be about here. This would be the river in the valley. There's a river that, or stream that, one of the clear streams comes down from this valley. And you can go up this valley. There is a saddle in the, call it mountain range right here that you can go up and over the saddle. Also, currently there is a road. The road takes this particular path up kind of the sides of the valley and up and over the saddle. So whether you're walking and go straight up there or traveling by car, the road cuts this way. This is the other side of the valley, and Helam would be back over here, and you can see the saddle. You can see the ridge kind of comes down here and then goes back up here. So here is the saddle. So you come over the saddle, come down this ridge, and you come into the Valley Alma. It's only about 5 to 6 miles on this side. This is looking south is towards the top, and north is towards the bottom. So we're looking from this down to this. All right, so Mormon to Helam, Book of Mormon says it takes 8 days. The Heartland model, it would take 19 days, and you get to a place where the water is not pure or clean. The Mesoamerican model takes 8 days, and you arrive at a place where there is pure, clean water. From Helam to Zarahemla, the Book of Mormon says 13 days. The Heartland model, it would take 31 days, so that doesn't match. Mesoamerican model, it takes 13 days. That matches. So again, the Heartland model does not match the Book of Mormon distances. The Mesoamerican model does match the Book of Mormon distances. All right, let's take a look at the distance from the plains of Nephihah to the city of Nephihah. In Alma 29:21, this is 62:18 in the LDS. And it came to pass that when this is talking about Moroni and his army from Zarahemla, had come to the city Nephihah, they did pitch their tents in the plains of Nephihah, which is near the city Nephihah. Now, in Hebrew, the phrase is near. This is the Hebrew korab. This is Strong's H7138, is used for meaning next to or adjacent. So the plains of Nephihah are adjacent to the city of Nephihah. Now it also says, and Moroni was desirous that the Lamanites should come out to battle against them upon the plains. So from this we know that Moroni could see and communicate with the Lamanites to be able to call them out to battle and see that they would not come out to battle. Continuing on in 29:26 or 62:22 in the LDS, it says, and it came to pass that Moroni caused that his men should march forth and come upon the top of the wall and let themselves down into that party of the city, yea, even on the west. So again, we have the phrase on the west. The reference here is the city, so this would be on the west side of the city, where the Lamanites did not camp with their armies. And it came to pass that they were all let down into the city by night by the means of their strong cords and their ladders. Thus, when morning came, they were all within the walls of the city. And now when the Lamanites awoke and saw that the armies of Moroni were within the walls, they were frightened exceedingly, inasmuch as they did flee out by the pass. So this would be to the east, since the army of Moroni was in the west part of the city. And now when Moroni saw that they were fleeing before him, he did cause that his men should march forth against them, and slew many, and surrounded many others, and took them prisoners. And the remainder of them, them being the Lamanites, fled to the land of Moroni, which was in the borders of the seashore. So they are fleeing to the seashore. And they were doing so out by a pass. So Mesoamerica, again, we're looking at the base of the Yucatan Peninsula here. We have Zarahemla, we have the river Sidon, which is the Usumacinta River. They would travel along the Rio Pasión, which is the Valley of Gideon. It's 115 miles from Zarahemla to where Nephihah would be. And Nephihah is actually in a plain. So the plains of Nephihah are next to the city of Nephihah. To the east is a pass through the Belize Mountains. It is the only pass through the Belize Mountains. There is no other way to get through the Belize Mountains until you're up here way to the north or down here in the south. And Moroni is here on the sea east coast. It's about 62 miles from Nephihah to Moroni. So the Mesoamerican model does agree with the Book of Mormon and the pass as described. This is a 3D model of the terrain. We're looking very specifically right around the city of Nephihah, the plains of Nephihah, and this pass. that goes right through here. So we have Nephihah. You can see that it's flat. So this would be the plains of Nephihah. These rolling hills are about 8 miles from one edge to the next. And this pass is actually fairly wide. It's 5 miles, typically about 5 miles wide. It is gently sloping. It's not flat. This is the high side. Down here is the low side. So we would have the army of Moroni coming in from Zarahemla on the west and going into the city of Nephihah on the west. And then as the Lamanite army comes out, there's actually two ways that you can easily get through these hills. Those are both marked here. Currently, there are roads that also go through these locations. You would get into this pass, and then you would go to the land of Moroni. So the Heartland specifies 3 cities of Nephihah. How they came about with those 3, don't know. Why they needed 3 locations, don't know. The website does not explain. So one is at Quincy, Illinois, which is right here, which is 53 miles south of Montrose, which is where Zemla is located for the Heartland model. There's no mention of the city Moroni on this map. Nephihah number 2 is near Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is way over here. Does have Moroni on the coast over here around Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. Zarahemla is over here on the Mississippi. And Nephihah number 3 is at Havana, Illinois, which on this map is like right over here, so not too far. This is about 63 miles from Zarahemla. All right, but we'll take a look at all 3 locations. Now, the plains of Nephihah, the Heartland model puts at Indiana. So, like from the west edge of Indiana, east edge of Indiana is where they labeled the plains of Nephihah. All right, so we have 2 inset maps from the Heartland model and then a map that I made that I can put labels on. And we have, and it came to pass that when they had come to the city Nephihah, they did pitch their tents in the plains of Nephihah, which is near the city Nephihah. So we have Zarahemla here and also here on the inset map. We have Nephihah here and here on the inset map, and it's about 50 miles from one to the other. Now the west edge of the plains of Nephihah are located here, and it's labeled here on the inset map here. That's 270 miles. Moroni is here at Washington, D.C. Heartland model's not clear whether it'd be like Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, but somewhere in this area is where they're proposing Moroni. And so when the Lamanites leave the city of Nephihah and go to Moroni, they would have to travel 1,194 miles. The only pass in that trek is the Cumberland Gap, which is located right here. There is what was called in the 17 and 1800s the Wilderness Road or Great Valley Road, which was the way from Washington, Philadelphia, down to the Cumberland Gap. Also note that the city of Nephi is right here, about 170 miles from the Cumberland Gap. It's interesting to note that with this location of places, the Lamanites would have to travel about 700 or 800 miles in their own territory to get to Moroni. And in doing so, they would have to go past Nephi, which is the stronghold of the Lamanites. So it doesn't explain, the Heartland model doesn't explain the justification of having to travel such a long distance, which if they were just trying to get away from the Nephites, why they wouldn't have stopped at Nephi, like I said, where the stronghold of the Lamanites was. Anyway, Nephi number 1, city of Nephi number 1, and the plains of Nephihah do not match the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. All right, Nephihah, city of Nephihah number 2. We have Zarahemla here. We have Nephihah at Scranton, which is located here. Now, the Book of Mormon says that the city of Nephihah was in the lands of the Nephites, which would be north of the narrow wilderness. Yet here on this map, it's shown as south of the narrow wilderness in the Lamanite lands, which is not what the Book of Mormon describes. It's about 800 miles, 796 miles from Zarahemla to the city of Nephihah at Scranton, Pennsylvania. The plains of Nephihah are here. It's 317 miles from Zarahemla to the eastern edge of Indiana. And it's another 479 miles to Nephihah number 2. And in this case, let's pick Moroni as Philadelphia. As I mentioned, Heartland model isn't real clear whether it's Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. But you'll notice that there is a river from Scranton all the way down to Philadelphia. So if the Lamanites had to exit city of Nephihah, they would just come down the river valley, and there is no pass for them to go through. So Nephihah number 2 and the plains of Nephihah do not match the Book of Mormon. All right, so let's take a look at Nephihah number 3. We have Zarahemla here. We have Nephihah here, which is here on this map. It's 62 miles from Zarahemla to Nephihah. We have the western edge of the plains of Nephihah. And so the Nephites, army of Moroni, would have to travel past Nephihah to get to the plains of Nephihah and then come back. It's about 268, 270 miles to the plains of Nephihah and another 196 miles back to the city of Nephihah. And if we go back to Moroni being at Washington, D.C., it's 1,263 miles. Again, we have the same issues with the Cumberland Gap as the only pass and why the Nephites would have to travel such a long distance to get to Moroni to feel safe when they bypass Nephi, which is the stronghold of the Nephite, or the Lamanites. So city of Nephihah number 3 and the plains of Nephihah do not match the Book of Mormon descriptions. So the distance between Nephihah number 1 at Quincy, Illinois, and the nearest part of Indiana, the plains of Nephihah, is 230 miles. There is no justification that this distance constitutes anything as being is near or adjacent to the city of Nephihah. And we also have that Moroni communicated with the Lamanite army to come out to battle on the plain. So it begs the question, what communication was used over a distance of 230 miles? And according to Alma 2926 or 6222 in the LDS, the army of Moroni camped in the plains of Nephihah and then the next night stormed the city of Nephihah. This would require the army of Moroni to travel 230 miles from Indiana to Quincy, Illinois in less than a day. Now, the current world record for distance running in one day on a flat track is 199 miles. And that's not carrying any equipment. That's just running clothes. It is not possible to travel 230 miles over uneven ground in less than a day on foot. The Heartland model also does not explain why the army of Moroni would have to travel 460 miles to get to a place that was only 53 miles from the original starting point. So the Heartland model locations of the plains of Nephihah and the city of Nephihah number 1 at Quincy, Illinois does not fit the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. City of Nephi number 2, the nearest part of Indiana to Scranton, Pennsylvania is 480 miles. Again, there's no justification that this distance constitutes being is near or adjacent to the city of Nephihah. We have the same issue about what type of communication was used over 480 miles, and still only being able to travel maximum of 199 miles in a day. You can't travel 480 miles in less than a day on foot. So the Heartland model location of the plains of Nephihah and the city of Nephihah number 2, Scranton, Pennsylvania, does not fit the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. And Nephihah number 3 at Havana, Illinois. It's 196 miles from the plains of Nephihah. Again, no justification that this distance constitutes anywhere being near or adjacent to the city of Nephihah. Again, what communication was used over 196 miles? If you can travel 199 miles world record pace in one day, it's not possible to travel 196 miles in less than a day. The Heartland model also does not explain why an army would travel 464 miles to get to a place that was only 62 miles from their original starting point. So the Heartland model locations of the plains of Nephihah and the city of Nephihah number 3 at Havana, Illinois does not fit the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. So none of the city of Nephihah locations in the Heartland model match the Book of Mormon. And we know from the Book of Mormon that the army of Moroni could communicate with the Lamanite army. In the Heartland model, you're 230 to 480 miles away, no communication is possible. Mesoamerican model, city of Nephihah lies within the plains of Nephihah. Armies just have to be outside of weapons range, and it's easy to communicate over that distance. The Book of Mormon says you can enter the city of Nephihah in less than a day after making camp. So call them out to battle. They don't come out to battle the next night. Let yourself into the city. The Heartland model, impossible to travel 196 or up to 480 miles in less than a day. Mesoamerican model, plains are right next to the city, a couple hundred yards, easy to travel. So the Heartland model does not match the Book of Mormon. The Mesoamerican model does match the Book of Mormon. All right, we talked a bit about the pass between city of Nephihah and Moroni, so we're going to take a look at that a little bit more. We have the verses here that I read before, and mentions that the army of Moroni let themselves down into the city on the west. Lamanites did not camp their armies there, so they were on the east part of the city. Now when the Lamanites awoke and saw that the armies of Moroni were within the walls, they were frightened exceedingly, insomuch that they did flee out by the pass, and this is a way to the east. And now when Moroni saw that they were fleeing before them, he caused, it is mentioned, march forth against them, slew many, surrounded many others, took them prisoners, and the remainder of them fled to the land of Moroni, which was in the borders of the seashore, which was east of the city of Nephihah. If you take a look at an internal map of the Book of Mormon lands, which is all of the places in relation to each other, regardless of world location, we see that all of the action from Zarahemla all the way down to Nephihah, plains of Nephihah, Moroni, South Wilderness are all in the southeast portion of the Book of Mormon lands. And here, again, we're at the base of the Yucatan Peninsula. This is the southeastern portion of the lands described in the Book of Mormon with regards to the Mesoamerican model. Zarahemla to Nephihah. I mentioned that the only other way to get to the East Coast is either go way to the north, be able to get to the East Coast or to the South. And also on the South here, as a note, this is the most difficult location to travel. This has the densest forest in Mesoamerica, right in here. The Mayans chopped paths through the vegetation so they could travel at a normal pace, but without paths chopped through the vegetation, you cannot go through the dense forest there. It would take weeks or months just to get a small distance here. So this pass is the only way through the Belize Mountains at this location. You can either come out the pass and fully out the pass and down to Moroni. There is a stream that goes from about where Moroni is up and through this ridge line right here. So it may be possible to also cut some time off and go directly down this stream to where the city of Moroni would be located. And this pass does not show up on any maps prior to 1857. This is a picture of the plains. And, this is around the city of Popton, Guatemala. You can see how flat it is. It's flat enough that they put an airport on it. Also, this is the only area of Mesoamerica that has savanna vegetation, meaning the weather is dry here and you have dry environment vegetation. The Belize Mountains creates a rain shield, and you can see in the unimproved area in this part that it's plains. It's not all forested. There is quite a bit of grassland. And so this is still a plain, even though, and also in the Book of Mormon times, this was a plain. In the Book of Mormon times, there was less rain, so there were less trees. So you can see that this would have been very much a very grassy plain in the Book of Mormon times with less water than what it gets today. All right, this is a map published in 1851. Now, does not show any pass on this map. It shows an unbroken mountain range. This is a map in 1858. Also does not show a pass. It shows an unbroken mountain range. Here, this is a map from 1857. This is the earliest map that shows a break in the mountain range. And the map is incorrect. This Sarstoon River doesn't actually go through the pass in the mountains. It kind of goes into a valley system. But the actual pass that we're talking about is not shown on this map. All right, another aspect of the Book of Mormon is it talks about, as the Book of Mormon's central site describes it as high civilization with regards to cities. So the Heartland model responded to the Book of Mormon central site with regards to criteria for the Book of Mormon. And so we have this criteria of having a high civilization with cities, kings, artisans, military, and priests. Now in 1 Nephi 397, this would be 12:1 in the LDS, says, and this is Nephi having his vision, looked and beheld the land of promise. And I beheld multitudes of people, yea, even as it were in number as many as the sand of the sea. And in Mormon 1:7, this is 1:6 in the LDS, it says, and it came to pass that I being Mormon, being 11 years old, was carried by my father into the land southward, even to the land of Zarahemla, the whole face of the land having become covered with buildings, and the people were as numerous almost as it were the sand of the sea. So this is Nephi's vision fulfilled. The Heartland Model statement says there are over 1 million mounds and settlements in North America. Now, here it is inferring that 1 million mounds infers a large number of people. It goes on to say, a firm foundation believes, along with nearly every non-Mormon archaeologist, these amazing mounds of the Hopewell and Adena people must be researched. And the question here is, for what purpose? The Heartland Model doesn't say for what purpose they should be researched. And not ignored, as most of those with so-called LDS scholarship ignore. The heartland of the United States, with the Mississippi Valley and the Ohio and Missouri rivers, is some of the best land in the world to have a large civilization of people. Now, they make a statement here. It just says, it just makes sense that the Hopewell were the Nephites and the Adena were the Jaredites. And the location for these statements is on the Heartland Model site at this source. So what does the Book of Mormon say about mounds? And I'm going to take a statement directly from the Heartland Model, which states, the Book of Mormon itself, interestingly enough, does not mention the term mound at all, and refers only twice to heaps of earth having been dug up, once in connection with the fortification of cities, and the other in connection with mining operations. And that statement is at the source listed here. So the Heartland Model authors agree that mounds have nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. So the question is, why even bring them up? Well, the Heartland Model also claims that the Hopewell are the Nephites, and the source for that statement is given here. So what does archaeology say about the Hopewell culture? Archaeologists have determined that very few of the mounds had major settlements in their proximity. They have determined that most settlements were small, agriculture-based, and located some distance away from the mounds. Population appears to have grown throughout the Hopewell period, although even at the highest levels density was only on the order of 1/2 person per square mile. This comes from Yale University at the source given here. The Heartland Model claim is that the Adena culture parallels the Jaredites. The Adena culture existed from 1500 BC to 300 AD, and the source for that statement is listed here. All right, concerning the Adena culture, archaeologists say that the Adena settlement system consisted of small, dispersed communities, usually living on secondary river terraces or along valley rims. Moreover, residential sites are typically located at least several hundred feet from the mounds. Again, this comes from Yale University source given here. And they lived in extended family groups of roughly 15 to 20 people, with several extended families forming a lineage or clan. Between 4 to 6 of these clans made up an Adena social group. So here we're talking about 60 to 100 people. And the source for this is given here. Now, regarding the locations of Nephites, Jaredites, and the people of Zarahemla, in Mosiah 5:60, this is 8:7 in the LDS, it says that the king said unto him, being grieved for the afflictions of my people, I caused that 43 of my people should take a journey into the wilderness, that therefore they might find the land of Zarahemla, that we might appeal to our brethren to deliver us out of bondage. So the location in city of Nephi is not the land of Zarahemla, because they had to go find the land of Zarahemla. And they were lost in the wilderness for the space of many days, yet they were diligent and found not the land of Zarahemla, but returned to this land, having traveled in a land among many waters. Now, the land among many waters is the description of the land desolation and where the Jaredites were, so they had to travel from the city of Nephi somewhere else to get to the land of where the Jaredites were located. And having discovered a land which was covered with bones of men and of beasts, and that would be of the Jaredites, and also covered with ruins of buildings of every kind. In Alma 137, this is 121 in the LDS, it says, and Coriantumr was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, Coriantumr being the last of the Jaredites, so he was coming from a place not in Zarahemla and was found by the people of Zarahemla, and he dwelt with them for the space of 9 moons. So the Jaredites did not occupy the same area as the Nephites or Zarahemla. And if you take a look at the pictures of where the Hopewell and Adena cultures existed, they existed in the exact same area, just at different times. So this is not what the Book of Mormon says. It conflicts with the Book of Mormon description. All right, so let's take a look at the mounds. The claim is that there are 1 million mounds. And so the shaded area is the area where mounds have been located and found. So within this area, the Heartland claim is there are 1 million mounds. Okay, so let's take a look at that. The shaded area is 1.17 million square miles. Now, mounds date from as early as 3500 BC to 1600 AD. This is 5,100 years of mound building. And the Heartland claim is 1 million mounds exist. That means that you only have to build, on average, 196 mounds per year over 5,100 years to get 1 million mounds. And that means that you only have to build 1 mound every 5,970 square miles per year. So the area of Connecticut. So if you take the area of Connecticut and build 1 mound in that area of Connecticut over this entire area, 196 Connecticut's, you could get 1 million mounds in 5,100 years. Now, archaeologists say that most of the mounds could be built in 3 weeks to a few months by a relatively few people. But we have a relatively few people in the size of the area of Connecticut making a mound every year. So the claim of 1 million mounds is not really a justification for large numbers of people. If we take a look at what archaeologists have determined as the population densities of ancient America, the key down here is in number of people per 100 square kilometers, but it gives a relative look at what the densities of people are. So in the Heartland, we have, from what archaeologists tell us, anywhere from 0.5 to 1 person per square mile in this area. The largest city found in the time of the Book of Mormon is Fort Ancient, which had, they estimate, around 500 people. In Mesoamerica, the average was over 10 people per square mile, and during the time of the Book of Mormon, they had cities with populations of over 50,000 people. Now that is the best description of as many as the sand of the sea. So what we have is mounds do not correspond to large numbers of people. In fact, the population in the eastern United States was about half a person to 1 person per square mile, which is a very low density. Archaeological evidence shows that Mesoamerica had 10 to 20 times the population density as the Heartland. With regards to cities, in the Heartland, cities were small, mostly 15 to 20 people per settlement, with the largest city during the period of the Nephites being 500 people at Fort Ancient. Cities in Mesoamerica during the times of the Nephites were up to over 50,000 people. Right, so the Book of Mormon does reference writing. Writing or writings are mentioned many times in the Book of Mormon. We can see that write is mentioned 123 times, writing 17 times, wrote 24 times, plate or plates 124 times, epistle 42 times, book 95 times, record 270 times, and they read something 74 times. Now, every book in the Book of Mormon mentions these terms, which means that all the way from the Jaredites through the Nephites, they all had writing. So where is there a history of writing and making records? So the Heartland, the claim is, yes, the Nephites would have scribes and records. That's why they buried them, to protect them from the Lamanites. The source for that is here. The logic here is assuming that the location is the Heartland, and since the Book of Mormon says that they had writing, then you're concluding that they would have writing in the Heartland, which is backwards logic. The facts: the Ojibwa tribe has what was called Waigwaas Bakun, which is writing on birch scrolls or birch bark scrolls. And archaeologists figure these may go back 400 years to sometime in the 1600s. And on these birch bark scrolls were used or put symbols or shapes, and these were used to augment memorizing oral histories. So it's kind of like things that jog your memory to make sure that your oral history is correct. It's not a true writing system. The first written language was actually Cherokee in 1820, so very, very late. Prior to what was written by the Cherokee and the Ojibwa, Native Americans only had a few petroglyphs, not writing, that conveyed basic information like sacred ideas. So, no written language in the eastern United States during the time of the Book of Mormon, and if you don't have a written language, it means you have no scribes or records. If we take a look at the Mesoamerican area, archaeologists have found 15 distinct writing systems and have identified these as all pre-Columbian and dating back to at least 1000 BC. So that gets into the Jaredite time frame in the Book of Ether. And pictured on the next slide are some actual scribes from a couple of codexes. And these are proof of scribes in Mesoamerica. So from the Codex Telleriano Reminiscence, we have a scribe as he's writing, and then a mixed text scribe from the Codex Vindobonensis. All right, let's talk about the appropriate timing of wars in the Book of Mormon. So here are the different army engagements or army movements described in the Book of Mormon when a time for these movements are given. Now, there are 47 army movements that have no date specified, but we do have a significant number in the 11th month, year end, first month, and second month. So a geographic location would have to explain a significant number of army movements in the latter part of the year and in the first 2 months of the year. Now, this would be the Hebrew year. So the beginning of the year in Hebrew would be March. And so the last 2 months of the year, you're talking January, February. First 2 months of the year, you're talking March, April. Now, for example, the weather in central Mexico consists of 5 months of a rainy season that starts in May and ends in September. In Mesoamerica, most Mayan war campaigns occurred in the dry season, anywhere from October through April. So, just as the timing in the Book of Mormon indicates. This is actually a picture of the same location during the dry season and the rainy season. You can see that traveling in the dry season is much easier than it is during the rainy season. Dry season, it's more open. Traveling is a lot easier. Now, in Northeast America, the North American Indian warfare typically occurred late in the summer and early fall months, not months at the end of the year. So, not in November, December, January, February, March, or April. Primarily because end of the summer was when food supplies were most plentiful, allowing tribes to mobilize large numbers of warriors without jeopardizing their ability to feed their communities. Also, warfare often served as a means of coping with grief and depopulation. So, such conflict, commonly known as a mourning war, usually began at the behest of a woman who had lost a son or husband and desired the group's male warriors to capture individuals from other groups who could replace those that they lost in their tribe. Captives might help maintain a stable population or appease the grief of a bereaved relative, because the aim of the warfare was to capture or acquire captives. Quick raids as opposed to pitched battles predominated, and reference for that is from the Oxford Reference. And so from this, we have North American Indian warfare does not match the Book of Mormon descriptions. All right, let's talk a bit about city destructions. In 3rd Nephi, starting in 4:6, or this is 8:5 in the LDS, and it came to pass in the 34th year, in the 1st month, in the 4th day of the month, there arose a great storm, such as one has never been known in all the land. And there was also a great and terrible tempest, and there was terrible thunder, insomuch as it did shake the whole earth, as it was about to divide asunder. And there were exceeding sharp lightnings, such as never had been known in all the land. And the city of Zarahemla did take fire, and the city of Moroni did sink into the depths of the sea, and the inhabitants thereof were drowned. And the earth was carried up upon the city of Moroni, and in the place of the city thereof there became a great mountain, and there was a great and terrible destruction in the land southward. But behold, there was a more great and terrible destruction in the land northward. For behold, the whole face of the land was changed because of the tempest, and the whirlwinds, and the thunderings, and the lightnings, and the exceeding great quaking of the whole earth. And behold, the great city Zarahemla have I burned with fire, and the inhabitants thereof. And behold, the great city Moroni have I caused to be sunk in the depths of the sea, and the inhabitants thereof to be drowned. And behold, the great city Moroni have I covered with earth, and the inhabitants thereof to hide their iniquities and their abominations from before my face, that the blood of the prophets and of the saints shall not come up any more unto me against them. And behold, the city of Gilgal have I caused to be sunk, and the inhabitants thereof to be buried up in the depths of the earth. Yea, and the city of Onehah, and the inhabitants thereof, and the city of Mokum, and the inhabitants thereof, and the city of Jerusalem, and the inhabitants thereof, and waters have I caused to come up in the stead thereof. And behold, the city of Gadiandi, and the city of Gadiamna, and the city of Jacob, and the city of Gimgimno, all these have I caused to be sunk, and made hills and valleys in the places thereof. And the inhabitants thereof have I buried up in the depths of the earth, to hide their wickedness and abominations from before my face, that the blood of the prophets and the saints should not come up any more unto me against them. And behold, that great city Jacobgath, which was inhabited by the people of King Jacob, have I caused to be burned with fire because of their sins and their wickedness, which was above all the wickedness of the whole earth, because of the secret murders and combinations. And behold, the city of Laman, and the city of Josh, and the city of Gad, and the city of Kishman, have I caused to be burned with fire, and the inhabitants thereof, because of their wickedness in casting out the prophets, and stoning those whom I did send to declare unto them concerning their wickedness and their abominations. So from all that description, we have the cities that were sunk or covered with earth in the list there, the cities that were destroyed by fire, and the cities that were destroyed by water. Now, here is a map of earthquake potential in the United States. We have Zarahemla, which is located in Iowa, which caught fire. Now, this is the area of the land southward, and you can see that there's very little in the land southward that um, has an earthquake potential to cause the earth to shift. And it says there was a great and terrible destruction in the land southward. Now, the East Tennessee seismic zone is the most active earthquake area in the land southward. This generates mostly magnitude 5 earthquakes with a few magnitude 6 earthquakes. So magnitude 5, magnitude 6, there are no large movements of earth. Now, we do have the Madrid Fault over here, which does produce very sizable earthquakes. We have the earthquake from 1812, which we do have eyewitness accounts for, and describe the terrible destructions that happened. Now, they have dated the previous large earthquakes on the Madrid Fault. They happened in 1450, 900, 300, and then all the way back to 2350 BC. None at the time of Christ. This is where the Heartland model puts the land northward, or the North Country. This would be in northern Pennsylvania, western New York. And you can see from this map, this is the least active geological area, with really no evidence of destructions anywhere in this area with regards to earthquake or earth movement. But we have from the Book of Mormon the description that, but behold, there was a more great and terrible destruction in the land northward. So the Heartland land northward has less capability for destruction than the land southward. Now, if we take a look at the earthquake potential in Mesoamerica, these are the different fault lines in Mesoamerica. Key one is this fault line that goes along the west coast of Mesoamerica. It's the Cocos Fault. On a map, we have the land southward, which would be the Grijalva River Basin. We have the land northward, which would be the Rio Balsas River Basin. And so the destructions by earth moving were in the land southward and land northward. We had the destructions of cities by fire, all kind of grouped together over here. And we had all of the cities destroyed by water grouped over here. We discussed in one of the proofs in part 1 that tsunamis occur in this particular area, and everything up this coastline is safe from tsunamis, so it matches exactly what the Book of Mormon says with the destructions of the water. Now, even though the surface fault line is off the west coast in Mesoamerica, the fault line itself actually extends fairly shallow under the ground almost to Mexico City before it plunges down into the mantle. And this explains why there are destructions so far away from the surface fault line, because the earthquakes are happening anywhere along this shallow fault underneath the ground. And when you take a look at earthquakes, this is from 1900 to 2022, so about 120 years. These were the earthquakes that were reported. I have the land southward here and the land northward here. The largest magnitude 8 earthquakes. One was registered in what would be the land southward, but 3 in the land northward. And you can see even the magnitude 7, these orange circles. There are a lot more of these in the land northward than the land southward. So just as the Book of Mormon describes the destructions in the land northward are more likely and more often than in the land southward. Now, with regards to the vapor of darkness that was described, this is in 3 Nephi 4:18, this is 8:20 in the LDS. And it came to pass that there was a thick darkness upon all the face of the land, insomuch that the inhabitants thereof, who had not fallen, could feel the vapor of darkness. So this is describing something close or somewhere near to the ground. And there could be no light because of the darkness, neither candles nor torches, neither could there be fire kindled with their fine and exceeding dry wood, so that there could not be any light at all. So this indicates a lack of oxygen to prevent the fires in a way that people themselves were not affected by the lack of oxygen. And there were not any light seen, neither fire nor glimmer, neither the sun nor the moon nor the stars, for so great were the mists of darkness which were upon the face of the land. Now, the description here is that the mists had to be a higher altitude to block the light from the sun and the moon and the stars. So the vapor of darkness is near the ground. The mist of darkness would be up in the air somewhere. There is no specific location for this description. So the question is there any place where this description can take place? Right? So in Mesoamerica, a volcanic eruption can explain the darkness and preventing the fires. Now we have the cities destroyed by fire, so we know that the observation described in the Book of Mormon didn't happen where these cities were because they caught fire. And so these cities must be outside of the area where the fires could not be started. So given the description that fire could not be lit with dry tinder, there must be some force at work preventing the fires. Also, there was a vapor that could be noticed. And these two descriptions are very similar to what is called a mazuka, which are gases emitted from a volcanic fumarole or from a volcanic eruption itself, where gases, carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide that are heavier than air will sink to the ground and create a ground fog that will prevent fires. And this particular description, you can see the fog coming down kind of this gully, but you can definitely see a fog. And this is carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, which will put fires out, which is why lava is flowing down the mountain from a volcano as it scorches vegetation, that it doesn't start forest fires is because it's accompanied by the carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide gases, which put the fires out as soon as the lava heats the vegetation to combustion. And you can see by this person standing right here that it hugs close to the ground and it doesn't affect people that are standing above it. Now, there is one volcano in that particular area. It's called El Chichon. The picture here is El Chichon before 1982. This volcano does have a history of explosive eruptions, and there is one actually dated to within the accuracy of the dating within the time that Jesus was crucified. Now you can also see that there are edges of additional calderas. So this is a mound growing in an older caldera. And as I mentioned, there was a volcano has had a history of eruptions, and when it does, it literally blows the top off of the mountain. Now, a comparison, the Mount St. Helens eruption was considered a volcano explosivity index of 5. The VEI scale goes up to 8, but anything in that range is like a super volcano. This is a picture of El Chichon after the eruption in 1982. As mentioned, it was the same size as this Mount St. Helens eruption, VEI 5. And you can see it blew the cone right out. This is a satellite image of that eruption, and you can see the plume. The city's destroyed by fire. I have highlighted here just as a reference. But you can see that it would have this ash cloud. And so that ash cloud could be the mist of darkness that causes the sun to be blotted out. And we know that that volcano eruptions and ash can cause that to happen. Here is an article from the Telegraph, news article from 4/24/2010. It was concerning a large eruption of the Katla volcano in Iceland in 1918. This was smaller than the Mount St. Helens eruption. It was classified as a VEI 4. Now, Thorin Bornsdottir is the only living islander at the time to have witnessed that explosion in 1918 and watched as the floodwaters swept through the lower ground just beneath her father's sheep farm. She said, "I was 7 at the time, but I remember it like it was yesterday," recalled the 98-year-old at the family farmhouse where she lives with her 100-year-old husband. "The ash cloud turned day to night, and it was so dark you could not even see the candle you were carrying." So this is just confirmation that volcanic eruption can create a volcanic ash cloud that does remove the ability to see the sun, the moon, the stars. All right, let's get to some other descriptions. Now, lunar calendar. There was a functional calendar and dating system in the Book of Mormon. In North America, many tribes kept track of time by observing the seasons and lunar months, although there was much variability. For some tribes, the year contained 4 seasons and started at a certain season, such as spring or fall. Others counted 5 seasons to a year. Some tribes defined a year as 12 moons, while others assigned it 13. Certain tribes that used the lunar calendar added an extra moon every few years just to keep it in sync with the seasons. And the source for that is given here. In Mesoamerica, they also had a lunar series. It was the first Mayan original contribution to the calendar. There's good evidence to say that the Maya were able to calculate the actual length of the average lunation very accurately. The lunar series chooses 29 or 30 days, following the Maya penchant for expressing only whole numbers. And these are just some of the representations that were used. So both Heartland and Mesoamerica had lunar calendars. Weight and measure systems. The requirement here is from the Book of Mormon evidence, location here. In North America, scales and weights were not known on the Western continent previous to the discovery by Europeans. There is no record of standards of dry or liquid measure. but it is probable that vessels of uniform size may have been used as such. And this comes from the Marianopolis University. Sources given here. In Mesoamerica, although Aztecs appear to have never used scales, they used numbers of easily countable items and volumes of specific commodities to facilitate trade. For example, they used, I'm not even going to pronounce that, a wooden box subdivided into divisions as small as 1/12 for the purpose of measuring corn and other dry goods. They also produced leather bags, cups, and jars of graded sizes for measuring dry and liquid goods, such as cocoa beans, resins, water, honey, and oils. The Maya also used a volume measure, words for armload and fistful, and description is from the source here at the NIST.gov site. This is a depiction of some Inca scales. So we know that they had scales and were measuring things by weight. Here are some scales depictions. Also, so the Inca did develop and employ scales. There is no evidence that resulting measurements were relative to a standard. Rather, they weighed things in relation to other goods. In terms of building structures, engineers to build houses, temples, towers, and highways using cement. In North America, the Indians used cements of animal, vegetable, and mineral origin, and sometimes combined two of these or added mineral substances for coloring. Again, this comes from the Marianopolis University. Regarding mounds, according to an article in ScienceDaily.com, the early indigenous people did not lead a simple life and were skilled workmen and engineers. They had the ability to construct earthen structures which were big in size in a matter of months or probably weeks. And we discussed that in the section on mounds. But in terms of cement, did not exist in North America. In Mesoamerica, ancient American cement was made using limestone and has thus far only been found in Mesoamerica. According to Mayan experts, Michael D. Coe and Stephen Houston, it was not until the late pre-classic period, 300 BC to 8250, that the Maya quickly realized the structural value of a concrete-like fill made from limestone rubble and lime-rich mud. This led to an explosion of activity around 100 BC. One area where cement was used extensively was in the city of Teotihuacan in central Mexico, which some Book of Mormon scholars consider to be in the land northward. In terms of highways, from 3rd Nephi 3:8 or 6:8 in the LDS, it says there were many highways cast up. So these are built up highways. In North America, the Heartland model identifies the Great Trail, as it is called, which begins in Delaware and went across Pennsylvania to Old Town along the Ohio River below Pittsburgh, then across Columbiana County to Bolivar, Ohio, westerly and up to Sandusky, then on west. Now, the note here is this was a path. This was not a built-up road or highway. So the description of the Book of Mormon or in the Heartland model doesn't fit the Book of Mormon. All right, in Hebrew, cast up, the Hebrew word is kalal. It's Strong's H5549. Means to lift up, cast up, or exalt. And it gives an example to cast up a highway, literally to build up a flat road above the surrounding ground. In Proverb 15:19, it says, the way or path of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorns, meaning a difficult way to travel. But the way or road of the righteous is made plain. It's translated as plain, but the word is kalal. So it's a flat, easy road to travel. So made plain is made easy to travel. So Sakbiob, as they're called currently, are raised roadways that consist of stone retaining walls with fill between them, paved on top with a powdered limestone or white plaster surface. So this does match the description in the Book of Mormon. Here are two examples. These images come from this source, and you can see that there is a retaining wall on either side, and then at the very top, it's a cement or very fine fill at the top, and because it's above the surrounding grounds, it's flat, it's easy to travel. You can see the cement whiteness down here, but also the retaining walls on either side. And this is how the Sakbiob are instructed. There is the retaining wall on the outside. There is a fill with rocks, large rocks, then smaller rocks, and then the concrete surface is put on top, as you can see in both of these images. In terms of precious metals, in North America, the earliest examples of metalwork in the New World come from the old copper culture that flourished in the upper Great Lakes region of North America beginning about 4000 BC and continuing over the course of the next 2000 years. This comes from the Britannica website. You can see an example. It is some good metalwork. Here's an example of the metalwork in Mesoamerica. The miniature hollow lost wax castings of the Mixtec goldsmiths in Mexico have never been surpassed in delicacy, realism, and precision. And some solid cast frogs from Panama are so tiny and fine that they must be viewed through a magnifying glass to be appreciated. So both cultures had good metalwork. Now, with regards to stonework, North America, the Native American ceremonial stone structures are found throughout the continental U.S. and portions of Canada. Northeastern U.S. and southeastern Canada have some of the highest concentrations of these structures. The structures include stone chambers, cairns, standing stones, enclosures, ceremonial walls, pedestal boulders, or dolmens, balanced rocks, and niches. The sites are known as ceremonial stone landscapes. And note here, no mortar was used in these structures. These are some examples of stonework from the eastern United States. There's a very simple bird representation. And this was a rock that they suppose kind of looked like this, and they further carved it to make it look like a badger. But not a whole lot of effort put into it. Right. Here is the stonework from Mesoamerica, circa 300 BC, so the time of the Nephites. You can see very intricate stonework, also very intricate stonework over here. This is an example of a stone-built tower or temple area, and so you can see that they were building extensive structures out of stone. With regards to fortifications, in North America, North American Indian fortifications varied depending on the region and tribe, but often included structures like earthwork mounds, palisades made of logs, some as high as 10 meters or 30 feet, and strategically placed defensive positions utilizing natural features like rivers and cliffs. In Mesoamerica, they also had walled cities. This is one example in a place called Morala de Leon. This is in the Petén Lakes region in Guatemala, and you can see a wall was found all the way around the city. All right, discussion of statements made by Joseph Smith. This was in a letter to Noah C. Saxton in January 4th of 1833. Joseph Smith said the Book of Mormon is a record of the forefathers of our Western tribes of Indians, having been found through the ministration of a holy angel, translated into our own language by the gift and power of God, after having been hid up in the earth for the last 1400 years, containing the word of God which was delivered unto them. By it we learn that our Western tribes of Indians are descendants from that Joseph that was sold into Egypt, and that the land of America is a promised land unto them, and unto it all the tribes of Israel will come, with as many as the Gentiles as will comply with the requisitions of the new covenant. Joseph Smith was not making a statement that the Western tribes in the United States were Book of Mormon people, but were descendants of Book of Mormon people. And you can find it from the source that's listed here. All right, we covered a lot. Let's go over a summary. From part one in the series, we have the River Sidon flowing northward. In the Heartland model, the Mississippi River flows southward, but in Mesoamerica, the Usumacinta River does flow northward. The head of the River Sidon means a source of the river. The Heartland model uses it as a confluence, and that was discussed as being an incorrect interpretation of head. We have the proof of the intersecting valleys, which occurs in Mesoamerica, does not occur in the Heartland. Proof of the Hill Ripla and the east-west valleys occurs in Mesoamerica, but does not in the Heartland model. The Helam exists in Mesoamerica, but not in the Heartland. The destruction of cities by water is explained in Mesoamerica, but not in the Heartland. The four plains in the Book of Mormon being described in the correct places occurs in Mesoamerica and not in the Heartland. The narrow passages by the city desolation are explained and described and occur in Mesoamerica. They do not occur in the Heartland model. And the shipping of timber in Helam 2.8 or 3.8 in the LDS is explained in Mesoamerica and not explained in the Heartland model. In part two of the series, we had statements made by Joseph Smith as editor of the Times and Seasons that the location that he thought was in Mesoamerica, not the Heartland. The land of promise, the total number of lands of promise, Mesoamerican model has the correct number, which is 3. The Heartland tries to combine those 3 into 1, which is an incorrect interpretation. The assessment of New Jerusalem, Book of Mormon only specifies New Jerusalem in Israel, does not speak to New Jerusalem in Missouri. Heartland model takes scriptures out of context to try and justify the Book of Mormon talking about a New Jerusalem in Missouri. We have boundaries for the lands, and each of the promised lands do have boundaries. It was discussed that God only appoints a certain area for a land of promise. And the Heartland model, again, tries to combine all of those into areas that were not appointed. And lands of promise begin, at least the lands of promise for Lehi and for the brother of Jared, begin at the sea west shore, which is in the Mesoamerican model, but the Heartland model does not account for that. Hill Cumorah, it's discussed that the Hill Cumorah, New York, was not named by Joseph Smith. It was named by Orson Pratt. So it's not really the Hill Cumorah in the Book of Mormon. Mesoamerica location for the Hill Cumorah would be the more correct location. Kind of the same with Zarahemla. Joseph Smith did not name Zarahemla for the Zarahemla in the Book of Mormon. He named it as Zarahemla as a namesake for the Zarahemla in the Book of Mormon. And Zarahemla fits in the Mesoamerican model. And the statements in the Evening and Morning Star that the Heartland model tries to identify as also applying to the Heartland really is not a correct interpretation. That the statements in the Evening and Morning Star were just echoing the hemispheric model that was common at that time. Right, and then part 3, what we covered, the cold in January does not fit for the Heartland, does fit for Mesoamerica. Hebrew metaphors for the sea, east, west, north, and south, accommodated for in the Mesoamerica model. The Heartland model gets that incorrect, does not account for those seas being a metaphor. The sea west being a single sea, that's correct in the Mesoamerica model. That is incorrect in the Heartland model, where the Heartland model tries to define 2 sea wests. The South Wilderness, being an area of land, as per the Hebrew definition, is correct in the Mesoamerica model, and is incorrect in the Heartland model, as the Heartland model goes against the Hebrew and the Webster's definition for a wilderness, and tries to identify the wilderness as a river. The distances are correct in the Mesoamerican model, from distance from Mormon to Helam. Distance is incorrect in the Heartland model. The distance from Helam to Zarahemla, also correct in the Mesoamerican model, is incorrect in the Heartland model. The distance between the plains of Nephihah and the city of Nephihah are correct in the Mesoamerican model. They are incorrect or not consistent with the descriptions in the Book of Mormon in the Heartland model. The pass between Nephihah and the city of Moroni is correct in the Mesoamerican model, and the Heartland model has real issues with that. Doesn't quite define the pass, and the only pass between the city of Nephihah and Moroni in the Heartland model really does not follow the descriptions in the Book of Mormon. The Heartland model talks about mounds, but mounds are not in the Book of Mormon, so not described in the Mesoamerican model, and the mounds in the Heartland model don't actually describe what the Heartland model is trying to use them for, which is to justify a high density of people. The number of mounds actually does not equate to a large number of people, and the archaeology of the Heartland model indicates a low density of people, whereas in Mesoamerica you do have a high density of people. That was the best description for what the Book of Mormon describes as many as the sands of the sea. In terms of writing, writing did not exist in the Heartland during the time of the Book of Mormon. It did in Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica has the appropriate history and rationale for the timing of wars described in the Book of Mormon, whereas the Heartland model, the wars that happened there were at a time different than what is described in the Book of Mormon, and of a different nature. The types of city destructions is all consistent with Mesoamerica model, The Heartland model does not have the destructions or the areas of the country defined in the Heartland do not have the types of destructions as described in the Book of Mormon. Both the peoples in Mesoamerica and the Heartland did have lunar calendars. Mesoamerica did have the concept of weights and measures, which was not in the Heartland area. Building of structures, use of cement is only known in Mesoamerica. It does not exist in Heartland. The raised highways do exist in Mesoamerica. Raised highways don't exist in the Heartland. Metal craftsmanship did exist both in the Heartland and in Mesoamerica. Stone craftsmanship did exist in both the Heartland and Mesoamerica, but the Mesoamerican area had a much higher degree of stone craftsmanship. And both places did have fortifications. And if you have any more questions, there is more information at bookofmormoninfo.com. Again, my name is Eric Turner.